Hi, everybody. I am Brian Clapp. I'm the director of content for workinsports.com, and this is Facebook Live. This is our fourth Facebook Live session. We started it back in December, and the format's pretty simple, actually. I have a theme for each show. Wait for it. That's my name, in case you were wondering how to spell it. I have a theme for each show, and I spend the first 10 to 15 minutes discussing that theme. This week, look up here. Advice for your sports job interviews. Okay, that's our theme for this week. That's what we're going to be talking about. But then after I get through the process of sharing some advice and sharing some tips, the next thing is we open it up to your questions. Now, you can ask me any questions you want. What I would ask is that your questions remain kind of brief. Because as you can see, I have this cool tool that it lets me share like text, and I'll be able to share your name and all your questions and things like that. But if it's too long, we had one a couple weeks ago that like took up the entire screen. So try, if you're going to write in a question later on in the show, try to make it condensed so that I can look at it quickly, formulate an opinion, and try to share something intelligent with you. If it's too long, it's just hard for me. It's bad show if I'm reading a lot rather than actually discussing it. So that's a really big help. The topic tonight, Dylan. Hey, that's the other thing too. I love it when you guys tell me where you're listening from, and that you're here in the room and you're listening and engaging. I love that. So I can put your name up there, Dylan. Great to have you here again. I remember you from last time. It's a really cool interactive experience to be able to be sharing you guys, your questions, and interacting with you and letting you follow up when I make a point and having a discussion about it. That's part of the magic of this process. And I want to invest more and more of our time in these live sessions. So I hope that you guys will continue to come and the audience continues to grow and we continue to have more fun with it. I will tell you, I will publish a repeat. Damien. Good to see you, Damien. Thank you for being here. I will, as I have been doing, I will publish the replay of this entire episode on our Facebook page, but I'll also put it on our blog, workinsports.com/blog. All of our content's there, including our podcast and various articles that are all geared towards trying to help you in your sports career. It's pretty simple. You know, we're a sports company that is trying to help you find jobs in the sports industry. We work with employment partners to publish their jobs, and then we try to give you advice, try to help you. And that's a lot of what this experience will be too. We are a premium site. We do charge a subscription fee. And the reason we do that is because it allows us to pull in jobs from the entire marketplace. I can go out to any job out there and bring it and put it on our site. Our team, our staff can do that and bring in all these jobs. We have over 10,000 jobs in the sports industry. And if we were totally reliant on only working with employers that paid us a fee, well, we're not providing as good of a service to you. We're not providing as many jobs that are out there. We're only giving you a little sliver, a little fragment of the market. So it's always been our goal to give you the entire market. In order to do that, we do charge a monthly fee. Now, the reason I have this code up here at the bottom, this workinsports.com/students, is because we run this really incredible deal for students, and I know a lot of students listening here. It's 87% off the normal price, so the monthly price. If you go to workinsports.com/students, you sign up using your .edu email address, because that's how we know you're a student. Hello. We give you a crazy discount. It's $30 for 6 months of full access, 10,000 jobs, all these great tools, a lot of really cool stuff. Gary, good to hear you. Good to see you, buddy. Glad to have you here again. Gary's been at every one of our sessions, and I love that about Gary. So continue as you come in, and as you're new to the group and as you're listening, definitely pop in there where you're listening from so I can say thank you and interact with you as well and get to know more of you. Every time we do one of these sessions, we have new and more different people coming in, and that's part of the fun. That's a lot of the fun, so that we can interact here. So let's get into today's topic. And as you know, Dave, good to see you. Charleston. As you know, the format is pretty simple. I'm going to follow along and dig into a subject. As you can see with our fancy graphics, talking about sports job interviews tonight. Good. Hey, Kevin. We're talking about sports job interviews tonight. This is what it all comes down to. You know, there's major pillars in the sports industry. If you want to work in the sports industry, there's major like content pillars. And I just hit my mic. Sorry about that. Robert, good to see you from Jose from Los Angeles, Robert from Pittsburgh. Boy, you got some drama, Robert, in Pittsburgh. We'll talk about that another time. But we're all sports fans, so we all know what's going on. James, congratulations on your new gig, by the way, James. Delaware Bluecoats, nice job. Okay, so the pillars of content. When you look at our site and you look at all the content that I've written and all the stuff that I share, there's certain categories that things fall into: internships, networking, interviewing, things of that nature, skills accumulation. But there's certain just buckets that are always super, super important. And interviewing, it all comes down to that, really. I mean, that's how you get your prove it point, right? You're not going to get a job without an interview. You all want jobs. So let's focus in on that. Let's talk about this experience, because unless you are doing this sort of thing a lot, don't remind me about the drama. Does anyone want to be on your favorite NFL team? Dude, that contract is going to hamstring you for a long time, my friends. Anyway, so the pillar that we want to talk about tonight is that interviewing process. Also, I want to tell you guys, at any time, if you don't hear me as well, let me know. My mic should be picking everything up fine. Camera is working well. Everything seems fine. But I would appreciate it if you, my daughter just walked in the room. Sorry. I would appreciate if you let me know if the mic is low or anything like that. I can always boost up my levels, because I can't hear myself. I'm not wearing headphones. So I just trust all of you. So let's get into today's subject. The subject, obviously up on the screen now in multiple places, is advice for your sports job interview. None of you are going to get jobs unless you go through that interview process. So how do you nail it? How do you do it right? What is somebody like me I've done hundreds of these interviews. What am I really looking for? Right? That's really the important way to look at this, is to almost flip it around and say, well, what do I think that other person wants? Well, that's what we're going to talk a lot about tonight. And that's how you're going to get yourself ahead. Now, if you notice, and I look around a lot and I'm doing different things, I want to stare at this all the time and stare at you and feel like I'm making that connection, but I'm also looking down to see comments. I'm also putting up graphics on the screen, and I also have some notes on the side. So if I'm looking around, hey, it's just the nature of the beast. I got a lot I'm doing here. I'm directing, I'm doing all of it. Okay, so first thing, Kevin, thank you. I appreciate that. Kevin, shout out to Atlanta. Lived there for many years. I did, not anymore, but I did for 7 years. Let's get back to this point. Okay, number one, it starts with research. Okay, I say this all the time, and the general follow-up is, well, what kind of research? What do you mean? So let's talk about that a little bit specifically. What I want you to be thinking about, though, is that research and all these little things we're going to talk about today are going to help you feel more confident in the interview process. It's going to help you with your nerves, because everybody gets nervous. But if you're prepared and you do the legwork and you do the research, and you do a lot of the other things I'm going to talk about, the nerves are going to start to subside. And that's important, okay? Because you want to give off your best impression. So the first thing, it starts with research. Well, what does that mean? What is research? You want to do it at the company level. So you want to ask yourself, Robert, we will talk about the phone interview later, okay? It starts with research. What you want to do is take it from the company level, okay? Identify who's in charge. Figure out a basic company org chart. Figure out who reports to who. You can get all this information on LinkedIn or other online resources, okay? If it's a company that has clients, who are their major clients? If it's a team, how are their attendance numbers? What's the news about the team? What's the buzz? What are people talking about? How does social media respond to this organization or this team or this agency? What are the people talking about? Is there a recent marketing campaign that they've launched? I'm looking at some of my notes because I don't memorize every possible question. How are they viewed on social media? What's the buzz surrounding the team? What's the tone of the communication? How do they talk out there in the marketplace? Are they dry and technical? Are they fun and mercurial? That's going to change the way you approach the interview. And the more details you know about these things, the more confident you will start to be. So here's an example. Okay, all these things are going to give you source material to pull from. All right. So when you're in that moment, it's going to give you a way to weave in that you have been researching their company. Now, what kind of a message does that send? That sends them the message that you are serious and you are interested about this job and this company. And that's a really important point, because the problem that I have when I'm interviewing people, or the problem that tons of people in the sports industry have, because I talk with all of them, is that they get people that just want to work in sports no matter where it is, or they get people that want to work for a professional team no matter where it is. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but they want people that want their job. They want people that want to work for their team. I talked with Colleen Scholes, who's the talent acquisition manager of the Philadelphia Eagles, and she said, I want somebody that wants to work for the Eagles. So the more research you do into the team, the more information you know and you can pull out during the interview process, you're proving your desire to know more about that team and to be a part of that organization, whether it's a marketing agency or a sales firm or whatever it may be. Doing more research shows that you're serious. Plus, okay, think of this example for a second. Let's say you're interviewing with a marketing agency, and these examples can fit for anything, but I'm just pulling some ideas out so I can show you how research weaves its way into the conversation. Let's say you're interviewing with a marketing agency, and you notice, because you've done your research, that one of their major clients is a minor league baseball team. Great. Now you have that knowledge. So now you're in the interview process and the conversation's flowing and things are going well. And you bring up the point, I see that one of your major clients is the Bowie Bay Sox. Well, last summer I worked for the Everett Aqua Sox, and I really got a good vibe for the audience and what's important to them and what motivates them. And I really feel like I have a good grasp for the minor league fan base. That's awesome, right? That's how you use Rob Thompson. That's how you use the research you do and you apply it to the interview process. So start with that research, okay? The next point I want to make is that you need to research yourself too. And here's what I mean. 95% of the questions that come up in the interview process are going to be about you. I mean, tell me about a time you struggled with a decision. Tell me about a time you failed and how you rebounded. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a time you took a marketing campaign from conception to activation. It's all going to be, tell me about your experiences. Well, you need to go refresh yourself on all the things you've done and accomplished and experiences and failures and successes, because you don't want to be winging it in the moment. You don't want to be across from somebody at the table and they say, tell me about a time you made a big mistake and how you rebounded from that. And you're thinking, I know I made a mistake, but what was that? Well, do some of this mental research beforehand into yourself, because every piece of experience that you can convey during the interview process is going to show you as a broader, more experienced, more holistic person. The more that you are really pulling from your experience and able to weave that into the questions they ask and being able to really have a quick answer and a confident answer towards what you are trying to get across, you don't want to be winging it off the top of your head. Go do your research into yourself. Remember some of your experiences. Remember what you did on that internship 3 years ago. Remember what you did when you volunteered for the local road race, because you want to pull those experiences out during the interview process. You don't want to be wondering, like, I know that I did this once. What was that? And think about how those things fit into those questions. Now, this is important. Interviewing is about an attitude, right? I've said this 1,000 times before. If you get the interview, they've already decided that you have you have the hard skills they need. You have the requirements for the job, right? They wouldn't have brought you in for the interview if they didn't know you already had the skills or the potential, but you didn't have the skills to do the right job. Interviewing is also really hard work for the organization. When I would have a job opening, it would be exciting because I knew I'd be bringing somebody in on staff, but I also knew it was about 3 months of me working pretty hard, going through resumes, doing phone interviews, bringing people in. And here's the deal. When I bring somebody in, and I guarantee this is true for everybody else out there too that's doing interviews, because again, I talk to them all. They want you to nail it. You go in there feeling nervous. You go in there wondering, like, oh gosh, are they going to like me? Are they going to, you're all worried. Okay. That person on the other side of the table wants you to nail it, because they don't want to start the whole process over again. They want you to be a rock star. They want you to kick butt. They want you to pull all the answers correctly and throw them out there. They are cheering for you because they decided to bring you in, especially that HR rep who has brought you in, kind of done your first phone interview, vetted you for a little bit, and then they present you in front of a hiring manager. They want you to do great. So go into the interview knowing that. Go into the interview knowing these people want you to win, Because the problem I see is that so many people go in thinking they're going to lose, and that brings out all these nerves. They stumble, they can't get to the right answer, and then they walk out thinking, oh, this is terrible, right? Frame your mind. They want you to do well. And here's the other thing. Don't snowball mistakes. You will probably answer a question at some point and think, oh God, I didn't really answer that the way I meant to, right? Let it go. You have to be like a defensive back and know that you maybe said something wrong or you gave up a touchdown, and you have to get out there the next play and answer the next one right, or stop the guy the next time. You have to let it go, because if it starts to snowball, it gets out of control real fast, and you have to let those moments go. Okay, number 4. First impressions matter. Okay, I'm not going to tell you how to dress. I'm not going to tell you to show up early. I'm not going to tell you any of that kind of stuff. You need to know that. Okay, but I'm telling you, every interviewer will evaluate you based on how you're dressed. And they will evaluate you about whether you make eye contact. And they will evaluate you whether you shake a hand nicely, or you're properly mature and you give off that right vibe. Remember, when you are in this interview room, you are trying to show off your soft skills. You will be challenged. You will be asked tough questions. You need to show your decisiveness and your confidence and your ability to make eye contact and that charisma. That's what has to come through. First impressions matter a lot. Okay, focus in on that. Plan for the project. Here's what I mean. You will likely be asked an in-the-moment assignment. Okay? Prepare yourself for this. Now, you can go read every ebook you want about the different 50 most common interview questions. Great. Go rehearse those. Do it on your own time. But I'm telling you, the bigger and more important the job is, or even just internships or whatever, they're competitive jobs. And so they're trying to narrow down the field. And one of the ways you're going to get it is you're going to get challenged on the spot. And what I mean by that is, again, I'll go back to a marketing example. You're interviewing for a marketing job, and I just was reading something from Kevin. Yeah, it's tough, man. You walk out of some of these. So Kevin said, I completely blew an in-person interview with NASCAR on a simple question. Right? 100% correct. So you have to let those moments go. You might blow it. You got to be able to move on to the next one. Okay. Plan for the project. Let's go back to that. Let's say you're interviewing with a marketing agency. It's a marketing coordinator job, or it's a whatever kind of job. And they will likely say something like, okay, pretend that we just signed Baker Mayfield as a new client. Tell us how you would do a year-long marketing plan for him and include social media. Okay, you're on the spot. Why do they ask a question like this? Well, they're not necessarily expecting that you are going to put together a better marketing plan than they would. They want to see how quickly and decisively and confident you can react. They want to see how quickly you process and how quickly you think and how you can come up with ideas and excited. And they want to judge your excitement. Are you enthused by this kind of a project? Like if you're scared, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? That's a bad sign. But if you're like, dude, this is cool, Baker Mayfield, all right, cool, let's get into this. And you start to show some excitement and you come out with some ideas and you're decisive and you're charismatic, that will go huge lengths. Plan for the project. What if it's a sales job? You might have somebody say to you, imagine you're on the phone with someone who was a previous season ticket holder and they decided they didn't want to be a season ticket holder anymore. And it was your job to try to get them back. And when you got them on the phone, all they did was complain about the direction of the team. How would you handle it? So what are you going to do? This is going to be your job. These are going to be real life scenarios. They are going to put you in that scenario. They are going to make you think through real life scenarios that will come up. So think about these things. Have this conversation with yourself. Have this discussion and figure out, okay, this is the kind of job I'm applying for. These are some of the pain points or the problems that come up as part of this job. This is the challenge of it. How would I answer it? How am I going to handle this? And the more you kind of practice these things, the more you become ready for anything they throw at you, because then you're pulling in your research. You've done your research into you. You're pulling into your own experiences. You're using all your knowledge and your experiences to really to share who you are, what you believe, how decisively you think, and that is just incredibly important. The last point I'm going to bring up before we get to the next topic, were the open-ended questions for all of you guys, is the follow-up questions. Now, I did a podcast just on this subject, and I think it is so important. Here's the deal. You go through an hour-long interview, or you're there at an organization for an entire day. You've been, meeting tons of different people. You're getting exhausted through this process, and you are likely to shut it down mentally near the end of when you feel things are winding down. But they are going to ask you, what questions do you have for me? And you need to be prepared for that moment. Now, if you're in a phone interview, it's easy. Write down questions beforehand, have them around you, be ready to go. Or if you're on a video interview, put them on sticky notes around your screen, and then have them. You can refer back to them while you're in the moment. Totally normal, totally great. All right, that's a great way to beat things. So now envision you're face to face with somebody, and they ask you, "What questions do you have for me?" If you say, how many days of vacation do I get? Or do I get 4th of July off? Or when do the benefits kick in? If you say something like that, don't come back. Don't come on the show anymore. I don't want to talk to you anymore. You need to do better. I'm being somewhat sarcastic, but it's true. You need to do a better job than that. Okay. So let's talk about some of these questions. I'm going to throw some out at you. I wrote some down beforehand because I like to write lists, and I practice a lot, but I like to have this to refer to. A lot of stuff I pull off the top of my head, but this is stuff I want to make sure I really nail with you. Now, again, this will be published. This whole episode will be on our blog and will be on our Facebook page. So you can go back and watch some of these questions and listen to these questions again. I think these are really good. And again, I'm somebody that does I have done a lot of interviews over my career. So having these kind of follow-up questions, you want the other person that you ask a question to be like, good question. All right, let's talk about it. So here's a couple for you. Here's one. In your view, what does success look like in this role? Get them talking. Get them explaining what's important to them in this role, what they want to see. In what ways did the previous person in this role succeed, and how did they fail? All right, good. You're thinking about the other person and how you can do a better job. All right. How much emphasis do you put on corporate culture? Great. Get them talking about the culture, the environment. Okay. What's the most important thing that can be accomplished in the first 90 days on this job? Everybody evaluates people on their first 90 days. That's kind of the standard operating procedure. So you're coming right out and saying, like, what are the most important things you see in the first 90 days in this job? How can I make an impact? Great. Okay. A personal story. I remember interviewing once with the CEO of a company, and I wouldn't have been reporting directly to the CEO. I would have been reporting to the SVP. But when you go through some of these long interview days, you get pulled around to a lot of different people. So I'm meeting with the CEO. It's going really well. And he asked me at the end, what questions do you have for me? And my thought was, I'm not going to report to this person directly, but my work could influence him. So I said to him, what can I do to help in this role to help free up my boss, the SVP, so that he can be freed up to help you? This guy just lit up like, wow, you're thinking about ways to allow my lieutenant, my right-hand person, to be more free to help me. What can you do to take off his plate? And he started throwing out ideas. You could do this and you could do that and blah, blah, blah. But he loved that concept. That's what you want to think about. What are you going to ask that's going to make them think, wow, this person really gets it? I think that's some powerful stuff. So those are 6 ideas on how you should nail the interview. Again, I'm not going to tell you how to dress. I'm not going to tell you to show up early. I'm not going to tell you to brush your teeth or to shave or anything like that. Those are things you should know by now. Those are things you should master. But if you're going to have an interview, these are the higher level thinking. These are the higher level concepts that you really need to embrace and you really need to dig into. So I hope that helps everyone. We are about 23 minutes in, which is, I always run over the time. I said about 15 minutes that I go on a topic and then 15 minutes for questions. So of course I will open up and go longer on the questions because every time that's pretty much what I do. I want to remind everybody too, if you're new coming in, please tell me in the comments where you're listening from, your name and where you're listening from. I like to know, get to know you guys, get to know who's out there and what you're interested in. I am, if you're turning in and you don't know who I am Brian Clapp. I'm the director of content for workandsports.com. I've worked in the sports industry for 20 years. I worked at CNN, Sports Illustrated, and Fox Sports. I was a TV producer. I was a news director. I was a coordinating producer. I was an editor. I've been a writer. I host our Work in Sports podcast, which if you don't subscribe to, you're nuts. I just published a great interview with Kurt Svoboda, the Associate Athletic Director at the University of Michigan, yesterday. It was awesome. Next Wednesday, is Mei-Lin Vu, who is the Cleveland Indians Manager of Talent Acquisition. And she is quite possibly the best interview I've ever done. She is just incredible. So tune into that next week. Get a feel for more of the content that we push out. Every Monday, we also do a podcast where we answer your questions like we do here. We're trying our best to interact with all of you and to, let you know that we're listening. We're trying to help. We're trying to share our experience and do what we can. To help you get that first job, that lasting job, that next job in the sports industry, because that's what I love. All right, we got one from Cole, looks like. I think it's a question. Follow-up questions are essential. Yeah, don't let that be the last touch point. Right, if you do a poor job, that's the lasting memory that you have. If you walk away not saying much or saying something that isn't that intelligent, that's your last impression. That's not a good last impression to leave. So I always try to follow up with a handwritten letter. Okay. So we're getting into follow-up. Sure. Yes, I totally agree. Matter of fact, I've been criticized before. What Cole's talking about is following up with a handwritten letter. I've been criticized before because I always stress that point. And we're talking more about the interview process today, but the follow-up is huge. Doing follow-up and doing a handwritten note, I've had people make fun of me and say that I'm like a grandfather. I almost said grandmother, but I guess I'd be a grandfather. Because that's old school and people don't do that anymore. Well, I'll tell you what, when you send an email, guess what? 90% of the time they skim it and delete it, or it doesn't get through at all. You send a handwritten note, you send something saying, I really appreciate your time. I look forward to discussing more about this role. Throw in your business card. They're going to look at it. They're going to read it, and it shows a little extra level of care. So I think Cole makes a really, really good point. Okay, Robert Lewis from Pittsburgh, our guy with Antonio Bryant. How can I get past a phone interview? It can be hard to understand me on the phone. I feel that I would be able to express my desire for the job better in person than on the phone. Robert, you know what? I agree with you 100%. I'm not a huge fan of phone interviews for exactly the reason you just said. You don't always get to convey. I don't hear that well on the phone. I don't know what it is. I hear fine when my kids are yelling at me or my wife. Hope she's not watching. I hope she's not one of the viewers right now. But I always hear that fine. But on the phone, for some reason, I just don't hear that great, which is kind of funny because I'm doing all these podcast interviews via the phone. But I have a bigger headset and a big old microphone. So it makes it a little bit easier. But in general, there's like a stepping over process where they're talking, I'm talking, or it just there. You don't get into that rhythm of conversation as easily on the phone. I find phone interviews to be tough. But what I would say is so much of it can be hard to understand you on the phone. Do you have a heavy accent, Robert, or are you from out of country or something along that lines? Because diction can be hard, or connection, or what I would say is with a phone interview, you want to clear out all distractions. You want to try to get on a landline if you can rather than a cell phone. So the reception is going to be clearer and better. You, again, I think, want to have your notes around you, and you want to have your resume, your cover letter, questions for follow-up. I mean, it's almost like an open book test in a way. And you need to wait a second after they ask a question, right? You need to give yourself a good heavy pause, because that stepping on the end of their word is really annoying for them. And sometimes if you jump in a little too early, it gets out of the rhythm too. So really wait and listen. Give it a good beat until you start to answer your question, and they will not have any kind of problem with that. They will respect that completely. I think having your materials around so you can, I like to do little bulleted lists because it kind of triggers something in my mind. I don't like to write things out really long, because if I write them out, there's no way I can kind of grasp that really quickly. But if you give yourself some bullets, some lists that are going to trigger a memory versus like a script that you're going to rehearse, I think that can work a lot better. So getting past the phone interview, It can be tough, but remember, usually the person that does the phone interview is an HR person. It's not going to be the hiring manager because they're doing screening calls, and they're going to ask you more specifics about your resume and about your experience and about your skills and about, they want to make sure that they bring you to a hiring manager that you can do the job. They want to make sure that they don't recommend somebody who can't do the gig, who doesn't have the actual qualifications. So, that's the really important part, is that they're going to focus a lot in on your skills. They're going to focus a lot in on the details of your resume. They're not going to ask you those big project questions because this might not be their expertise. They might not even know how to do some of those things. They're going to ask you more the fundamental questions, like, do you know this skill? Do you have this ability? Have you done this before? So really get to do the research into yourself and those questions. And I think you'll perform better in the phone interviews, and just try to breathe and pause through it, because you can have some problems for the rhythm of it, the rhythm of the phone conversation. Damien, do you have tips for preparing for a second and third interview? Yeah, they're still very applicable, everything we've talked about tonight. What I would say, it depends. You need to know who you're interviewing with in the second and third, because like I was just kind of alluding to, your first interview, that's a phone interview, will likely be with an HR rep, and they're going to be doing the screening conversation to make sure you have the checklist of skills. The secondary one could be with the hiring manager, and then the third one, or sometimes the second one might be with not a peer, but somebody just barely above the peer, and the third one would be with the actual hiring manager or the manager of the department. You generally tend to go up higher and higher on the level as you go deeper into the interview process. So if I've interviewed before, or I've been interviewing before, what would you let's say I was interviewing before. The first interview, HR rep puts them through a phone call. So this is when I was at Fox Sports Northwest. HR rep puts them through a phone call, makes sure they have all my checklist. Great. Then they get the resume, comes to me. I might do a quick phone call too, just to see if there's a banter, a charisma, a vibe that I get, the positive from them. Then I come in and do a face-to-face with them. They'd meet with me face-to-face. Then there'd be a secondary level where it would be, I'd bring in a couple of my lieutenants who they would be more directly reporting to. And then they would be in a kind of group session, a panel interview. And then another time, that third interview, that third step, when we really narrowed it down, I'd bring them in to meet with the general manager, my boss, because they'd want to have the final say. So essentially, each one of these steps, you're going higher and higher into the chain of the business. The second interview is all going to, with the ones with somebody like me or your direct report or other kind of peers that would be on your level. That's going to be how you do the job and how you fit. It's all going to be about that. Then when you meet with the GM, they want to know you, or the CEO or the top level person or the boss of your boss. They want to know how you're going to fit within their culture. They want to know if you're going to have those soft skills. Are they passionate? Are they excitable? Are they into this? Is this important to them? That's what they want to see. They're not going to probably be pushing you on the project level kind of stuff. That's probably not going to happen. They're going to be thinking bigger frame. They're going to be thinking about the overall business structure and culture, and can this person make a positive impact here? So it's kind of like you frame your mind a little bit differently for each step of the process. So I'm reading a question on the fly. It's every step you're going to have a different person, a different audience. So you just have to think about how to appeal to that audience. Ryan Martin, not to veer off track. I do want to tell everybody, your questions can be on anything. It doesn't have to be on interviewing. It can be anything sports related, sports career related. You probably don't want to ask me, personal stuff, because I might not answer it, but you can ask me about anything in your sports career. So Ryan says, not to veer off track, but I'm passionate about one day becoming a sports broadcaster, but I'm only in eighth grade. Hey, Ryan. Robert Lewis, I will follow up with you on that. Robert, are you part of the private Facebook group? Because if you are, you can message me there as well, and we can discuss. You can message me there, or you can check with me on LinkedIn. We can talk there. Okay. Ryan, back to your question. Not to veer off track, but I'm passionate about one day becoming a sports broadcaster, but I'm only in the eighth grade. My daughter's in sixth grade. What steps can I take to put my foot in the door and set myself up for success in high school, college, and beyond? Ryan, good for you, man. It's so important to know what you're into, and the earlier you kind of figure that out, the better. I'm going to take your question off the screen because it was taking up my entire chest area. So let's talk about this. You've hit my wheelhouse because I've spent most of my career in the sports broadcasting world. I've worked with hundreds of anchors and reporters. They're some of my best friends in the industry. So this is something I'm into and I'm passionate about. What I would tell you is that you have a whole suite of opportunity that nobody in my generation, when I was coming up in the industry in the 90s, none of us had, right? You have streaming, you have YouTube, you have practice modules, you have all these great tools of you have iPhones that have better cameras. What I would say is go to your high school and start to and probably starting off small. So I wouldn't say go to the high school and say, hey, I want to do streaming of the football team. Maybe you start out streaming the volleyball team and you do play-by-play for it. And maybe you get a couple of your friends to help you out with it. And no school that I've ever experienced, unless they're one of the huge powerhouses in Texas, but especially the smaller schools that don't always get attention for the smaller programs. If you're willing to do some of that stuff and do a live stream of a volleyball match and you call it and you do the play-by-play for it and you do a report, you interview some of the students afterwards, and student athletes afterwards, just building up your repetition and that kind of stuff will make such a big difference. You get more confidence the more you do the actual broadcasting, the play-by-play. You can practice into your webcam, you can do all these different rehearsals, but really getting out there at a live event and trying to do it there can really make a big difference. Now, I've shared this piece of advice before in the live session because somebody asked a question about this similarly last time, and I'll reiterate it again. What I would suggest too is that your writing skills are super important when you want to be a sports broadcaster. So watch a game. Let's say it's Warriors, Lakers, something like that. Some top game, right? Watch a game and write down how you would do a 15 to 20 second ESPN style intro. Or if you're a reporter, what would be your minute long kind of story that you do about this game, or your recap if you were telling somebody about it? Do that, write it down, practice it in a webcam, and then watch ESPN that night or watch FS1 that night and see how they do it. What did they see from this game? What was the story they told? What research did they do? And the more you start to do this, you're going to see how the professionals, the experts in this, craft a story. And you're going to inherently get better the more you do it as well. So work on those condensed writing skills, because what most people don't realize is that in sports broadcasting, you're getting 20 to 25 seconds to do a lead into a big game. You might get a minute to do a recap story or a wrap up story or interview story or anything like that. So the more you can practice how to condense and get a lot across in a short amount of time, the better you will be. And the best thing you can do is do it yourself and then watch how an expert did it and try to compare those two things and get notes. So work on your comfort on camera. Work with your iPhone, do your practicing, do some live streaming, go to the local high school, extend that to a small college as you get better at that, extend it to the football team, which gets a lot more press. Just the more you can get involved in doing those things, the more repetition and practice you can get, the better you will be. So Ryan, I hope that helps you. Okay, Becky. Hello, Becky. Welcome back again. Kevin, I saw your question on panel interviews too. I'll get to that one next, unless I missed another one. Not necessarily an interview question, but a job application. Do I include more documents than requested or wait to bring it up in the interview? I have a portfolio project that would highlight my knowledge. I think the more you can submit early on, the better your chances of being recognized. That's my take. Okay. I actually spoke today. I did an interview today for an upcoming podcast. With Melanie Newman, who's a broadcaster with the Frisco Rough Riders. She's one of only 5 women play-by-play in professional baseball. And she said when she was applying for her first job with the Bowie, I think it was the Bowie Bay Sox. No, Mobile. Sorry. I'm trying to remember. Minor league teams, lots of them. She said that when she was applying, there was tons of people. There were really a lot of people that were applying for this job. But she followed up with her website that had a lot more of her work on it than just the demo reel they requested. And because she did that, they saw more of her play-by-play experience and thought, oh, that's what we need for this role. She is the right match. So sometimes I think, no, don't go crazy. But sometimes I think the more you supply that can show you in a really good professional setting, it's not going to hurt you. It's really not. I mean, the more you can do to show, the breadth of your knowledge and that you might hit that right thing that they're looking for, I think you go for it. So don't worry too much about that. Okay. Jose, the question is going to be a little too long. So try to see, this is what happens. See what I mean? So if you can condense that, because it's going to be really bad if I sit here reading this and trying to interpret it live on the air. This don't work. So try to condense for it. Becky. Oh, okay. So this is a follow-up to the point that I gave a little while ago. Yes, I agree with that. I'm a high school coach and love students taking initiative. Look up NFHS broadcast too. Yes, that used to be Play On Sports used to be with them, the NFHS network, and now they're on their own and they do a lot of their own live streaming websites, etc., for smaller high schools. Okay, Kevin. Panel interviews. During a panel interview, obviously you address everyone, but if you get a good rapport with one of the panelists, should you play that up and focus a little more on them or not? Yes. Okay, so here's my take on panel interviews. Generally what happens in a panel interview is you're going to have 6 or 7 people and they're going to be across the table from you or around kind of in a semicircle, and you're going to feel like the spotlight's all on you, and it is, because you're the only one they care about. And what happens is they generally work out a routine beforehand and say, okay, I'm going to ask, then you're going to ask, then you're going to ask, and they try to mix it up. It's not just a straight line, right? So you get question number 4 and you get question number 7, and they come at you differently. All right. What I always try to do, in what I've done when I'm interviewing as well, is whoever asks you the question, make eye contact, focus on them to give them the first. I'm acting like I'm looking at somebody. I'm not ignoring you. Make eye contact with them. Answer their question for the first 30 seconds or so, and then start to break into making eye contact with others. You don't want it to turn into a one-on-one. You want to make sure that the other people are still there and they know that you're connecting with them as well. So make that first eye contact with the person that asked the question. Answer to them directly for a little bit, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and really make that kind of, oh yeah, okay, and then answer and going, and then start to look around a little bit more like you're addressing the whole crew. And trust me, that works. And if you start to build a rapport with them, with a certain person, when somebody else asks you a question and you first direct your answer to them, go to that person next. That person you started to build a rapport with, and make eye contact with them. Stay there for a second and then look around, because that person's going to be picking up on your vibe. I mean, this isn't dating, but it is kind of like that. You're letting them know, like, I feel like we're making a rapport here, and I want you to know I'm giving you the attention as well. So I definitely think giving that extra level of attention to somebody that you're starting to build a little bit of rapport with is totally worth it. Don't exclude everybody else. Stay focused with everybody else as well, but try to give a little extra attention to that person. Becky has another good piece of advice. Look at NAIA colleges and how they stream games. I work at a college. Becky, you are very busy. But yes, it is true. A lot of smaller colleges still compete, still have athletic departments, but they don't have huge budgets. So if you can volunteer and get involved in some of those programs and offer them up something they don't otherwise have, like, hey, I'm willing to come in and live stream your, whatever games and do the play-by-play for it, they're not going to say no, right? Okay. Damien, I'm looking to attend the SMWW Sports Career Conference in February. Is it prudent or presumptuous to take my resume with me to hand out? It is not presumptuous. It is prudent. I'll make it simple. I've actually been a speaker at their conferences before. They are good. They have a lot of people there. I assume you're talking about the NFL Combine one, because I think that's their biggest of the year. And I spoke at it a couple years ago. Adam Schefter was there. Howie Roseman was there. There were a lot of sales executives there. There were agents there. A lot of good information. What I would say is bring your questions too. Like, really think about questions beforehand, because the way they structure it is there's like let's say a half an hour panel discussion, and then they let people come up to the mic and ask questions while they're still on the panel. But then when that panelist finishes too, they step off to the side of the stage and they still make themselves available to answer more questions one-on-one. So I think what you want to do, your rhythm or your method for this should be, I'm going to ask a good question at the microphone, And then I'm going to meet them. If it's somebody that you are targeting that could be really interesting for your career, have an opportunity, you're going to meet them then off the stage, have another question there, try to have an intelligent dialogue with them, and then feel like if it's appropriate and say, I did bring copies of my resume along with me. I'd love to leave one with you and just see where it takes you. It can't hurt. And it shows preparation too. Robert, how can I listen to your podcast? Could you do more sports industry professional interviews on Facebook Live format? Okay, so two-part question. How can I listen to your podcast if you have any kind of a smartphone? Or you can listen on our site. You don't even have to have a smartphone. But basically, any podcast player, whether it's iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, we're on all of them. Just search for the Work in Sports Podcast, and you will find it, and you can subscribe to it, and then you can listen to all of our episodes. I think we're at 144 now, which is pretty crazy. And I have a lot of really cool guests this month. I mentioned Maylin Vu, who's the talent acquisition manager for the Cleveland Indians, Lee DeLeon, who is the associate athletic director at Purdue, which was a really fantastic interview. I just had Melanie Newman on, who's the broadcaster for the Frisco Rough Riders. There is Louis Polis, who is the Philadelphia Phillies director of baseball research. I'm trying to think of all the other ones I have booked. I have a lot coming up. Tiara Brown, who is the manager of corporate responsibility for the Charlotte Hornets. Ian Graham, who is the HR manager for the San Diego Padres. These are the kind of guests that we bring on every week, and they share everything. I had Lee Steinberg on, which was really cool. I was nervous, which is okay. So subscribe to the Work in Sports podcast and listen in on these. As for the Facebook Live format, one of the things I have thought about is I can do split screen interviews. And that's something I'm going to be experimenting with. So we will try to do some more split screen interviews in the coming weeks or months. I'm trying to master the format a little bit since it's only our fourth one, but I'm trying to master the format a little bit, but then we'll start doing some live interviews too. Trying to build the audience a little bit too. So tell your friends. Okay. Here we go, Jose. Thank you for cutting this down a little bit. What kind of internships or jobs should I be looking into to gain experience in the athlete representation field? My future career is to be a sports agent. That's excellent. Sports agents need and want volunteers and interns. Matter of fact, I know many people that are in our group, in our Work in Sports podcast group, which is on our Facebook group page. This is the Work in Sports page as a company. There's also a Work in Sports podcast group that you can join. If you're not in there, you should be. There are many people in that group that are doing or have done internships with sports agencies. Sports agencies, you hear the name Lee Steinberg, or you hear the name Scott Boras. I was drawing a blank there. My goodness. These are huge organizations. These aren't just one person going around holding hands with Pat Mahomes. These are huge organizations and they need help. So look for those agencies and look for opportunities there. That's where you should be. That's the kind of internships or jobs you should be looking for to gain experience is right there. I would also say marketing experience, because a lot of being an agent is also working on the marketing side. So marketing internships are great. Economics, knowing the salary cap and contract negotiation, that sort of stuff is really important. So having a well-rounded suite of knowledge, whether that's in marketing or economics or contract negotiation or salary cap analysis or the actual CBA, I mean, knowing those things and jobs that reflect that, really important stuff. Okay. How long should your answers be when answering questions? You don't want to be too short or too long. I talk a lot. So I might not be the best person to ask, but I would say this, okay? Rambling is a really bad thing. You want to be concise and you also want to be factual and in the moment of your experience. Like, if you feel like you're still answering their question by weaving in your experience, finish that. Okay. But then stop, right? Finish your thoughts, use your experience, tell that good story, but then stop. You don't have to give a secondary one. If they feel like there's a need for a follow-up, they'll give it. So answer their question and don't feel like you need to keep layering on top of it. Like, oh, I forgot to say this. No, just be okay with stopping, especially if you've given a good, I've got this experience and I'm showing you how my experience fits in with your question. If you hit that, stop, lay it out. Okay. Cause you've hit the mark. Kevin, perfect answer. Thank you. I mean, It's what we've come to expect that I have the perfect answer. Just kidding. Every once in a while, I have to be cocky. Yeah. So Kevin, following up on take it your resume and take plenty along with your portfolio of successful projects. Yep, I totally agree, Kevin. Jessica, I think I remember you from the podcast group that you just got a job in Philadelphia as a photographer, I believe. Which is why you have a question about photographers or videographers lined up to speak on the podcast. You know, I don't, but I can take a note and I will. And if you are one, so maybe I should just have you on. It's a really good question. Photographers and videographers, really interesting stuff. I've worked with a lot actually, so I could probably pull from some people that I know and get a good guest on there for you. So I love suggestions for who we should have as guests too. So if you guys are saying like, hey, can you get somebody from analytics, or can you get somebody from sales, or can you get somebody from marketing, or can you get somebody from operations or minor league sports or whatever, hit me up with that stuff. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Join our private Facebook group. Message me here now. I mean, I love getting feedback on what you guys want because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to supply you what you want. Okay, question. Hi, Tori. Tori's back. I have 20 years of experience in teaching and just got my master's in sports management. Congratulations. Should I do an internship before trying to interview for a job in sports? I think both things can happen concurrently. I think you could be interviewing for jobs in sports, and if that happens, great. Take it. You need to realize that 20 years of experience in teaching, those skills translate, right? Those skills work. And especially if you layer in that master's in sports management. And I'm sure in your master's in sports management program, you had to do some internships, or you had to do some volunteer events, or you had to do some case study work. All that sort of stuff makes you a very viable candidate. And I'm telling you, you need to lean into the fact that as a teacher, you are a leader. You can organize people. You can put together thoughts. You can, bring together ideas and concepts and all that kind of stuff. That is exactly what hiring managers are looking for. When I'm hiring, and when I've hired in the past, and when I talk to people who are hiring now, a lot of them are looking for somebody that has the maturity, even if they don't have all of the experience needed for the job. They're looking for somebody that has the maturity that they know they'll be able to trust and will get good results out of. And if you lean into your 20 years of experience in teaching and really make that along with your master's and showing how serious you are about this sports industry, I don't see any reason why you couldn't get a job rather than an internship. And I think that would be great. But at the same time, what's to say you don't apply for some internships as well, because you want to have that fallback plan. You want to be able to do whatever comes up. Have you ever heard of any closing lines or final question during an interview that have helped a candidate stand out? Well, we kind of hit on it in the earlier parts. I think it's those final follow-up questions that make all the difference in the world. They're going to ask you, what questions do you have for me? And you need to have a plan for how you're going to approach that. What do you want to know about, which is important, but also how can you give off that vibe that you're thinking big about this company, right? You're thinking big about this organization, and you're thinking about the challenges they face and how you can fix them. Asking about, how important is corporate culture around here? Well, maybe you do. Maybe that's something that's really interesting to you, is how they value their employees. Those sort of things are really important and can make for a good discussion. That person on the other side of the room wants to feel like you are really into this and their organization and being a part of this team. You need to convey some of that, but at the same time, you need to pull from your research. You need to pull from the work you did beforehand to prepare for this interview and use that in this phase. Leave them with a lasting impression that you've thought about their business, you've thought about their problems, you've thought about how you can make a difference there, and you can, explain it with confidence. So I think that's the lasting impression you want to give. Jose, follow up. Let's see if it fits. Interning for Cal State University for about a year. Yeah, I mean, it depends what you're doing within the athletic department. I'll leave that up there so other people can read it. I kind of skimmed it quickly, but I mean, it depends on what you're doing. If your internship is to sit in the weight room and make sure, everybody has clean towels, then I don't know how well that's going to convey. But remember, yes, your internship and your volunteer and all those experiences are the most important part of your resume. But also remember, there's, classes you've taken, there's things that you've learned, there's experiences you've had. Pull all that stuff together and make and present yourself in the right way. I think people tend to self-censor a lot and think, oh, I'm not ready for this job, so I'm not going to apply for it. Well, that might be true. Don't apply for stuff you're not qualified for. But at the same level, you need to really dig deep inside and think to yourself, like, well, why am I not qualified for this job? And if I know why I'm not qualified for it, well, then I have my game plan now. I know what I need to go learn or do or have experience with in order to be more qualified. So if you're looking at job descriptions and you're looking at what their requirements are and you don't have those things, well, that's your game plan. Now you know what you need to go get. So start watching YouTube videos or start taking a course or do some volunteer work and make sure you focus in on these things and start to fill in those gaps. Tori, you're welcome. That was a heartfelt, you're welcome. Dave, you are also welcome. Thank you for the insight. Thank you for the question, I should say. Thanks. Any tips on what the next steps are after connecting with people on LinkedIn? Jessica, this is a good question. This is actually one of the main focuses of our last Facebook Live. So this is something I will speak to with some level of authority, I would think. Next steps are after connecting with people on LinkedIn. Okay, so let's focus on this really quickly. We'll go through this. You want to have intention with your connections. I see so many people that just go out there and connect with a ton of people, and then that's it. They never do anything more with it. They never follow up. They never start a conversation. They never like anything. They never do anything. It just kind of dies there. And I'm like, well, what's the point? People will request to connect with me, and I'll connect with them. I'll accept the connection, and then I'll never hear from that person again. And I think, well, what was the point of that? Like, you just wanted to raise your number of connections? Well, stupid. My theory is that you should only be connecting with the right people and the right amount of people that you feel like you can actually start to build a relationship with. And here's how you do that. Start out by, when you connect with them, include a note and include your reason for connecting with them. So say something like, hey, I heard you on the Kurtz I'm terrible at pronouncing his last name. Yesterday's podcast guest from the University of Michigan, Associate Athletic Director. You listen to his podcast and you think, man, this guy is awesome. So now you want to connect with him on LinkedIn. Well, you include a note in there and you say, I heard you on the Work in Sports podcast yesterday. Really enjoyed what you had to say. Would love to connect with you here. He accepts because Kurt's a great guy. Now it's up to you. What's next? Well, I would see what groups he's in. I would see what kind of things he comments on. I would see what kind of stuff he shares. I would like them. I might even share with what he's posting with my audience. I would maybe give a comment on something that he's posted and try to be intelligent and engaged in that conversation. And then over time, maybe you share something from, the University of Michigan where he works, or you try to build you see a news item that applies to him and his job, and you message him and you say, hey, I just saw this article about attendance records being broken at the University of Michigan volleyball team, and I thought of you. Just engaging in that way. You're not asking for anything. You're not saying, can I have a job, or can you give me advice, or can you tell me what I should do next? You're providing something. You're providing him likes. You're providing him shares. You're providing him an interesting article that he might find engaging. And after you do that for a while, there might be a return in the conversation. He might say, hey, thanks. That's a really cool article. I'm so proud of what we've accomplished. Once you start to get there, then you can start to maybe ask for something and say, hey, I'm thinking of applying for this job at another school, and I was wondering if you had any advice for the interview process. Something like that. Don't ask them for something. Ask them for advice. And I mean tangible versus intangible. So ask them for something intangible like advice versus tangible like, can you get me a job? When you give people information or opportunity like that, that can make a big difference. When people ask me a pointed question and they say, hey, how do I specifically do this thing? I answer. I had somebody message me yesterday that said, I would like to pay you to help our son choose what college to go to. And I said, you don't have to pay me. Let me help. I'm willing to help, and everybody else out there is too. I guarantee it. But you have to approach it the right way. Just don't come out asking for things. Engage first. Start a conversation first. Start a dialogue first. Like, share, do that kind of stuff. Be noticeable for the right reasons, and then start to layer in question of advice. You're showing that you respect their time and their experience by asking for advice. And I don't think that hurts. I really don't. Okay, Gary. Gary, good question. How can you right the ship if you feel the interview turn negatively? I've been here. I've watched it happen with people. I actually had an interview I was doing once, and this person was messing up so bad. And I looked at them and I said, how about we take a break? Because they were just floundering and it was hard for me to watch. Now, I didn't end up hiring the person, but they came back much stronger after we took a break and just like got them to center themselves a little bit, got a little water, you know. My advice is you have to, I tend to be, and fits in with my personality. So you have to do this in your own personality trait. I tend to, if I know that I'm messing it, I will look at them and smile and say, I went down the wrong path there. Can I start over? And a lot of times they'll be like, yeah, sure. I've done it. I've been in interviews before where I'm interviewing for somebody for the podcast, or I've been interviewing somebody for an article that I'm writing. And I start to ask my question and I'm like, that was the worst question I've ever said. Or I think I've totally messed it up. And I'll even say to them, like, wait, scratch that. Let me start over. And I'll pick it up in 3, 2, 1 and go from there. So I think sometimes if it fits within your personality and you're comfortable doing it, I think there's some charisma that comes from that and some natural, just, it's not that you're not taking yourself too seriously, but it's that you're just willing to laugh a little bit, not laughing, but like smiling and saying, wait, hold on. I didn't handle that the right way. Can I please start over again? And smiling through it, not like panic, not like, oh my gosh, I really messed that up. Can I start over, please? Because then you're pleading and that's kind of, it's not as confident. If you're kind of smile a little bit and say, all right, let me start over. I didn't quite handle that right. It shows a little bit different confidence. So other than that, I would say if you answer a question, you don't feel like you nailed it, just you have to let it go and be focused for the next question and let that go. Don't stew on that. Let it go. Move on to the next one. Because if you stew on it, you're going to mess up the next one too. If you rebound, they're going to forget about the mistake. A lot of times they will. Maybe they won't, but sometimes they will. Okay, it is 8:30. And we've had a lot of great questions, and I appreciate all of you being here. Our goal is to do this every Thursday night at 7:30 Eastern from my lovely home studio. And we'll have a different theme each week, and we'll try to just answer your question. I'll handle the theme. We'll talk about some in detail, and then I'll open it up to your questions. And I would love for you guys, everybody that's been listening today, share it with your friends that are sports crazed. Share it with your friends that are interested in changing careers. Share it with your friends that might need advice or just different types of career advice, because I want to grow this conversation. I want this to continue to grow and get bigger. And I want to provide as much value as I can. And the larger we get the group, the better off I think the conversation will be. And the chances are somebody else is going to ask a question that you've always been wondering the answer to as well, but maybe you were too afraid to ask. So please share this with other people. I will post the whole entire clip on our blog, and I will also post it, the replay, on the Work in Sports Facebook page, and I'll probably put it on our podcast group page as well. If you're not a subscriber to our podcast, please become one. It's a great show. It's my baby. I'm so proud of it. We're doing a lot of great things there. And then I also feel like we are, I think we've been doing some pretty cool conversations here too. So I hope you'll come back to another episode. We will try to continue to just push that conversation forward and try to give you high level, actionable advice. That's the goal here. I'm not going to give you the superficial stuff. I'm not going to give you the weak stuff that you might see out there of people saying, clickbaity articles that tell you, here's the 5 things you need to go on your internship. And it's like, dress nicely. I hate that stuff. Don't give me the superficial stuff. And I won't. I'm always going to give you deep depth and actionable advice and stuff that you can take away and put to work. So I'm going to talk with my hands a lot too. That's just who I am. So tune in next Thursday, listen to the Work in Sports podcast, check out workinsports.com. We have over 10,000 jobs available right now. And I hope to see you all next week. Thanks for listening. And end broadcast.